Have you ever wondered why it seems like you can stretch your hamstrings over and over and over and never actually get them to be any more flexible? In this video, I'm going to reveal what causes most people to have tight hamstrings. The 2 simple steps that I teach my patients that allow them to gain hamstring flexibility without stretching, and how your newly found hamstring flexibility will help you to bulletproof your low back. But first, let me tell you my story of going from this to this without ever having to do this. See, I was a professional athlete in my youth. I spent countless hours trying to get more flexible hamstrings by stretching them. That's what we're taught, right? But it never felt like I got anywhere. And it was boring. If someone would have told me back then that I could gain flexibility in my hamstrings without stretching them, I would have laughed, but I'm living proof that it happened. And the results that I see with my patients who incorporate the methods I'm going to teach you in this video still make me smile. It's so cool to see how the body responds when we treat it properly. What an amazing machine. What I was missing in my youth was knowledge that I gained at a sports med conference I attended in my late 30s. And even though I'd done 4 years of pre-med at the university and another 4 years at chiropractic college, I'd worked with some of the most elite athletes in the world, I hadn't yet been taught how to unlock the body's natural hamstring flexibility. You see, all of the muscles in your body, they want to be strong, flexible, and resilient. And think about that. Think of how great your body would feel if that was the case, which it can be. But there are a few things that can get in the way of your muscles living in that state. First, your muscles are controlled by your brain. And when you stretch, you're trying to increase the flexibility of the muscle fibers themselves. But those muscle fibers are told to contract or relax by your brain. And if your brain is telling your hamstrings to stay tight, you're never going to gain flexibility with stretching. And that's what I did all those years when I was stretching and getting nowhere. Second, the 650 muscles in your body do not work in isolation, but they work as teams, like your bicep and your tricep. Your muscles' primary function is not moving you around. That's their secondary purpose. Their primary function is to stabilize your joints. Without muscles to stabilize your joints, you just collapse into a pile of bones. So if your brain doesn't sense stability around your hips and low back, then it's going to tighten down on the muscles that will limit your motion in order to protect you. So I find that most of my patients who say, I just have tight hamstrings, or I've always had tight hamstrings, that they have more of a brain problem instead of a muscle fiber problem. Their hamstrings are tight not because of shortening of the hamstring muscle, although that can happen over time, but rather because their brain is telling their hamstrings to stay tight. So then the question becomes, how do you tell your brain to relax? I'm going to give you 2 things that I teach my patients to do just that. But first, I'm going to share a story of an athlete patient who came in to see me with super tight hamstrings, also complaining of low back pain. I treat a lot of athletes in my private practice, and I had a patient come and see me for low back pain that he had that was interfering with his everyday life, but it was also keeping him from playing ice hockey. And ice hockey was his passion. It was his time with his friends, it was his mental therapy. He loved it. But his lower back would get so tight that bending over, even things like putting on his pants, would cause his low back muscles to go into spasm when he stood up, and he felt like his back was always on the verge of going out. And he had super tight hamstrings. He could only bend down and touch slightly below his knees. He invited me to join a hockey league he played in, and I went and practiced with his team a few times. And what I noticed is on the ice prior to playing, the coach would lead the players through stretches, including this hamstring stretch. Knowing what I know about the brain and tight hamstrings, I asked the patient to stop doing that hamstring stretch and instead do 2 simple exercises for a week and see how his hamstrings started feeling. And within that week, he was already gaining hamstring flexibility. His hamstrings didn't feel like they were going to cramp, and his lower back muscles had stopped spasming. All that without stretching his hamstrings once. I'm going to teach you those exercises up next, but it's important to understand that your tight hamstrings and your lower back tightness, they are related. And many times gaining flexibility in your hamstrings will help your back tension to calm down. So to give the brain what it wants so that it'll give you the relaxation and lengthening in your hamstrings without stretching them, I'm going to give you 2 exercises to start doing and 1 thing to stop doing. First, the thing to stop doing. You need to stop bending from your low back. This might seem like a small thing, but it is a signal you are sending to your brain that says, lock down the hamstrings. And you might not be aware you're bending from your low back because you can't see back there. Want to know a trick to tell if you're bending from your low back? When you bend from your lower back, you get folds and creases in your belly because your lower back is directly opposite your abdomen. So if you're bending properly from your hips, then your low back will stay in neutral and you won't get creases in your belly. When might you be bending over from your lower back? It can be common things like getting into and out of a chair, or bending over to wash your face in the morning, or when you unload the dishwasher. Every time you round in your lower back, you tell your hamstring muscles to guard. And each time you bend over like an old man or an old woman, you're ratcheting up the tightness in your hamstrings, putting them on red alert. So stop doing that. That even means with this stretch, because remember, we're not going to stretch our hamstrings anymore. It is key to realize that what we do over and over in this life is who we become. So start learning to move like a strong, flexible athlete, and over time, you'll start to feel better and carry yourself differently. Isn't that cool? So how are you going to bend over? You're going to hinge from your hips and not from your back. Your spine will stay straight. Your hip joints are big, strong, and powerful. Your back joints, by comparison, are tiny and weak. So when you go to get out of a chair, you're going to hinge from your big and powerful hips, not your back. The same with getting in a chair. And when you bend over to wash your face, it'll look like this. And unloading the dishwasher becomes a hip and a hamstring stretch while you keep your housemates happy. This may seem like it's a simple thing. How big of a difference could it make? But it is really important stuff. Do you know the leading reason that people end up losing their independence and have to move to an assisted living facility? It's because they stop having the ability to safely get in and out of a seated position, like on and off a toilet or up and down from the dining table. That ability has everything to do with bending from your hips and not your back. Moving from your hips helps you maintain good hip joint flexibility and hip muscle strength. I want each of us to maintain our independence and physical abilities as long as possible. I know I certainly do. What we are discussing here directly relates to that. Now the two exercises that give you hamstring flexibility without having to stretch your hamstrings. The first one is what I call a modified good morning. Know before we start that not every exercise is appropriate for everyone. So make sure to check in with your doc to see if these exercises will be good for you. These exercises should never cause discomfort or pain. So to do the modified good morning exercise, what you're going to do is stand in a place where you can hold on to something sturdy if you start to lose your balance these first few times when you're trying it. And what you're going to do is with your feet about hips width apart, what you're going to do is slowly come back from your hips, keeping your chest upright like you're going to kind of bow towards someone and your spine straight. We're going to kind of go back like this. If we're doing it properly, we're going to feel a stretch into the back of our legs, back here. That stretch is more of an activation of the muscle, and we're going to hold this for about 3 seconds when we come down. If we're doing it right, we're also going to feel the weight come into our heels and the weight leave the front of our feet. Also, you might feel tension in your low back as you do this motion. That's just, again, activating that whole posterior chain of muscles. So slowly coming back. I'm not so much trying to bend over, although you'll do that to the point that you feel like you can, but all I want to feel is like an activation or a strengthening of my hamstring muscles as I bend over. I do not want to go down and do this. That's not going to gain me anything as far as hamstring flexibility or range of motion in my hips. All it's going to do is round in my low back. And again, we don't want to tell our brain to start guarding the tissues. So the other angle here, I'm going to slowly come backwards like this and just letting myself hang there and having those hamstring muscles activated to keep my body from falling over. Again, my spine is staying straight. I like to do about 3 sets, 10 reps of this. Just kind of hanging out there. A great way to wake up your hamstrings and pattern in good hinging from your hips first thing in the morning, although you can do these exercises anytime. Common mistakes are that someone would take and round from their back as they do this motion. Someone might be more forward in their feet with their knees bent. If they're kind of here, this would not be a good morning. So we're keeping the legs straight, coming back with the hips, weight into the heels, spine straight, and hanging here like this for 3 seconds. Then slowly come up. I want to imagine that I have a string pulled through the top of my head, and so I'm lengthening as I bend over this way, lengthening, pulling up this way. Good. And coming back up. It's the modified good morning exercise. When doing these exercises, you may feel tension in the back of your legs at your hamstring muscles, and that's good. You're not so much stretching your hamstrings as you're using them to resist falling forward. And the sensation of the stretch in your hamstrings means you're bending from your hips versus your back, which is the movement we want to pattern in. With this exercise, we are working to change the signaling to your brain about your hamstrings, and that is going to help increase your flexibility. Also with this exercise, you're going to increase the activation and strength of your gluteus maximus muscle. That's the strongest muscle in your body, should be, and one of the most important muscles in your body. When your gluteus maximus muscle is strong and activated, you'll feel more energetic, more powerful, and you'll decrease your chances of hurting your low back. Remember, a critical added benefit of this exercise is that you're patterning in good movement from your hips versus your spine. Doing this will help you avoid injury, be able to do more physically, and help you to maintain your hip mobility as you age. If you move like an athlete versus a feeble old man or woman, then over time you will feel more like the former versus the latter. I like to do 3 sets of 10 reps of this exercise. Each repetition takes about 5 seconds, so you can do a set in less than 1 minute and complete the whole exercise in just 4 minutes. Funny thing, soon you will start to realize that bending over to wash your face or unload the dishwasher or pick up something off a chair, that all of those motions, when done properly, are just like this modified good morning exercise. What I came to realize was that just by properly hinging from my hips and keeping my spine in neutral during my daily activities, that I was actually gaining hamstring flexibility throughout my day, just with the tasks I was already doing. Exercise number 2, this exercise comes at your brain and neurology from another aspect. Remember I said earlier that your muscles work as teammates and not in isolation? There are a dozen or so tiny muscles around your hip joint that stabilize that joint. When those tiny stabilizer muscles are not conditioned and firing properly, a signal gets sent to your brain warning about your hip instability. And when your brain gets that warning, it tells your hamstrings, lock down. So with this second exercise, it might seem like, how's that going to help with my hamstrings, getting them more flexible? But remember, we're going to help get you hamstring lengthening by working with your brain instead of against it. This exercise is the advanced clamshell exercise. It's going to really fire your internal and external rotators of your hip and help your brain to realize that there's stability there, and so it doesn't need to lock down on your hamstrings. We're going to do this exercise by lying on our side. We're going to bring our knees up to about 45 degrees. It can be down on my side like this. And then what I'm going to do is bring my thighs so that they're about parallel, about 6 inches between my knees. And then what I'm going to do from here is take my foot up and then bring my foot down to my other foot. So like this, bring my feet together and then apart, the whole time rotating around my femur here. What I don't want to do is open up like this and close down like that. I want to maintain the control of internal and external rotation at my hip as I'm doing this motion. So now that you understand how to effectively get more hamstring flexibility without having to stretch, what if I told you you could supercharge your results just by sitting? Well, sitting in a particular way. I'm always searching for tricks to help my patients, and my journey led me all the way to Paris to study with a posture guru. She taught me how to lengthen my hamstrings even while I was sitting. I can usually get someone to master the technique in under 10 minutes. If you want to learn the secrets I learned in Paris, check out this video. It is a game changer. And until next time, take care.